So you followed my last vlog about voting, and you agree you're going to go vote. So how do you decide how you're going to vote? We talked about the president one, but let's talk about all the other things. So how do you figure out how you're going to vote on your where you are? There might be more local elections. There might be Senate elections. So you've got other nationally based ones, but based in your states. You've got Senate ones. You have House members, but you're also going to have city officials and county officials, and we have a lieutenant governor race. We have all of those. So how do you decide how you're going to vote on those? And there's multiple ways to do it. And I'm going to give you the educated way of doing it and the shortcuts way of doing it. Okay? So the educated way of doing it is obviously the hardest way. And that is you got to actually pay attention, and you have to actually go out there and figure out who all these people are and decide whether or not you support one of them versus the others of them. As a matter of fact, if you're doing that, you're already late to the game. And that's because they probably already had a primary election at some point in which they picked who was going to get to be on this election. And so you didn't get to, maybe the person you really wanted's not even there anymore because you weren't there to support them before. And so if you're like in my state, which is idiotic, and they have a top two system. So in a lot of our races now in the state of Washington, I get to pick between two Democrats. Thank you very much. Because they'll have 97 people in the primary election, and the top two vote getters carry on. And in Washington state, that means two Democrats, and we fight over which Democrats. And yes, even among two Democrats, I probably like one more than the other. I probably believe one of them would be better at the job or certainly less bad at the job than the other. And so you have to actually go through the process. And what do you look at? You can look at all sorts of things. You look at their credentials, depending on the role. It can be things like what's their educational background? What's their work background? It's really like hiring somebody. That's all we're doing is hiring people to do a job for us. We're a representative republic. We are hiring people to represent us to do things. And so you can have a criteria of things that you're going to follow, things that you care about. Is this, one of the classic standard ones is, would you let this person watch your kids? Okay, if you wouldn't let them watch your kids, you probably don't want them watching your state. Although Trump would be an interesting person to have watch my kids. He's raised some kids. I'd trust him to watch my kids. They'd come back having had a way better time than I'd ever given to them because he's a billionaire and has an airplane and things like that. So you've got those. Washington has some interesting ones because we have a really strong referendum system here. And so we're constantly using that system to change our own laws and so forth, which that matters because and all states have some sort of that. We just use it a lot because of the fact that we can. Any one of us can come up with something. And very often we use it because our elected officials do something and we want to say, no, don't do that. And so we go remove whatever they just did, which is kind of fun. We like doing that. They don't listen to us very good because then they'll often turn straight around and do it again. And so we have voted to have our car tabs for registering our cars be $30 like a half dozen or more times. Every time we do it, they either go to court and sue us and take it down, or they accept it and immediately start raising it again. They cannot get it through their heads that we don't like using the amount we pay on the tabs for our cars to pay for everything under the sun. But they keep getting this idea, and so it continues to happen, and so we smack them down. And the most recent time we voted for it, not just an election or two ago, we voted for it, we knocked it down to $30 again, and last week they beat us in court and said we didn't write it properly, blah blah blah. They never listen and go, okay, if we all voted for this over and over and over and over again, how about you just listen to us? So as you go through your, how are you going to decide? Whatever state you're in, there's probably a voter's guide. Not every state has one, but most do. You can look in there. The way the voter's guides are done are very different from state to state. I don't like Washington's all that much. The one thing I do like about it is all of the things, all of the referendum type stuff that we're voting for, the language of it is in there so you can actually see what it actually says. So if you want to do this the educated way, don't believe what somebody else says about it. Actually read this stuff yourself. Imagine that, okay? So in Oregon, the voter's guide, at least when we lived there, the voter's guide, not only did it give you that stuff, but it allowed other people to, they went out to certain groups and asked them for statements that get written in there, like the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, those sorts of folks regularly get to, but then others can pay to put something in there. So if you had an issue that might affect law enforcement, you might have law enforcement guilds or unions decide to pay to put in there their opinion, those sorts of things. So now we're starting to get into some of the shortcut ways of doing it. Very often with the Oregon Voter's Guide, it was really simple. I could just turn to the Voter's Guide section for one and look at who was for and who was against. Because for most people, it's a shortcut, but it's based upon reality. There are people who believe in things and came to their opinions the same way as me. And if they're coming to those opinions the same way as me, I'm likely to agree with them. And so I may not be fully educated on a specific topic, but people I respect and people I agree with and the way that they think, they're going to have come to an opinion, and it's going to matter a lot to them on whatever issue it is. And very often I could just look through there and go, okay, I'm going to agree with these people and not those people, you know? And, you know, I could go through and say, if this issue, if Greenpeace and PETA think this, and the farmers of America think this, the FFA and all these the farmer groups, they're on opposite sides. I don't care what they think. I know which side I'm standing with. If PETA's for it, I'm probably against it. Okay, it's one of the shortcuts. What are the other shortcuts that you can take? One of them is finding somebody that you respect. Okay, my wife and I, we vote very similarly. Not identical, but pretty similarly. I am the more actively involved one out of the two of us. So elections come up pretty often. I mean, sometimes even every year there'll be an election cycle that comes up. Certainly every 2 years they come up. And sometimes she decides to get involved and she does all of her own research and figures it all out. And maybe she'll mark her voter's guide and I'll mark mine, and we compare and we find that we end up in the same place. But occasionally she'll just go, let me see your ballot. In our state, they're mailed to us, all of us. It's a terrible idea, by the way. But they've been doing it for a while. That's how we do it here. And so they mail it to us. And so she'll go, okay, I'm just going to do all the same things as you. And sometimes she cares to know why I voted for each thing the way it is. And sometimes she's in a hurry and she's now grandma and she has other things to do. And she says, okay, I'm just going to vote the way you did. Okay? That is a legitimate way of doing it. It's a legitimate way of going, somebody that you know and respect, how are you voting? I'll vote the same way. A lot of states have a party line one, that if you know that you're with one party or the other, there are straight ticket ones. Those are less common now than they were. Washington, they wouldn't work because it's two Democrats. How do you vote straight Democrat ticket if all the candidates are Democrats? You got to pick somebody. But there's that possibility in some places where you can check a single box and every Republican that appears on the whole ballot, you'll automatically be chosen for. The other one are getting vote guides. So if you don't have a person who you would naturally look to and ask how they're going to vote, there are other ones out there. You can search. Maybe you're an issue voter. Maybe you're a Second Amendment voter. You can get a voter's guide from the NRA that's going to tell you we support all of, they're going to highlight all of the people that they're for. Okay, it might not be as direct as saying you vote for these people because there's all sorts of laws about 501c3 versus all of these things, but you can find voter guides out there. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll give you a score sheet and say, we scored this person 100% with us and we scored this person 0% for us. fairly clear who they'd like you to vote for. So those are some ways of shortcutting the system to figure it out. Whatever it is, figure it out and go vote.